Hi everyone, it's Natalie here, and I've got my second video in the series about anger. I just wanted to start this one by talking really frankly about the role uh, that self-compassion and the way we feel about ourselves plays in our response when we're angry. So when I was really struggling to try and get a hold of my own anger and figure out how to handle it, I came across a quote that's a pretty powerful internet quote that people are very fond of now. Um, and the quote is, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." And it is generally attributed to the Buddha. And the sad thing is, it's actually not a quote from the Buddha. But that actually really doesn't matter because, frankly, the impact that it had on me was so powerful that it ultimately became life-changing. So, in order to make that understandable, I need to back up a little bit. So, again, I was working toward I guess I had gotten most of my tendency to just become triggered and blow up under control. And that particular problem had arisen because of being in a number of abusive situations where I was literally being yelled and screamed at and physically threatened on a regular basis, which is hideous, and sadly, I think it's a lot more common for women than anyone ever really wants to admit. But that is where it had come from. I had really hit my point of enoughness with that, and any kind of threat towards the self was enough to warrant striking back. So that had become really very hardwired into my nervous system by that point. By the time I started to get it under control and had started to manage it, and I think by the time I remember hearing this this next part that I'm going to tell you, it was manageable by that point. What I was really struggling with was less to do with striking out at others and more to do with striking at myself when I was angry, because I started to find myself really capable of blaming myself for being unworthy of all kinds of things at that point. So I ended up practicing at a Buddhist temple in Chicago, and I remember one of my teachers there, that I'm still really pretty close to. I just saw her again in up in Ann Arbor, Michigan in October. And she's impaired. She's very hearing impaired at this point in her life, and her presence is one of the most loving and delightful you can possibly imagine, because she is able to communicate everything through her eyes, really, at this point. She still speaks. She's still absolutely capable of hearing. It's just that it has changed her presence. But on this particular occasion, what I recall was she was telling us a story, and I cannot recall who she attributed it to, about us having a choice, right? And recognizing at any moment when anger arises and we find ourselves with a knife in hand, that we have a choice to either strike out at someone else with the knife. And because most of us recognize on some level it's not helpful to do that, right? We know that it destroys our sense of integrity. It can destroy our relationships with other people. It can destroy, it can poison all sorts of things. So, in recognizing that it's not possible or reasonable to strike out with the knife, the tendency a lot of us will develop or have developed throughout our lives, usually starting in childhood, is to strike inward at ourselves. So instead of it's your fault and you're the one to blame, we have the tendency to go, oh, it's my fault. I'm the one to blame. I did this. And for that anger at the self to become just hideous. It can lead us into all sorts of things. We spiral into horrific thoughts about ourselves. We replay stories that we have in our minds about all of our failings, about all of the things in our lives that we could have done better that we didn't. It's a time when we tend to replay regrets and relive all sorts of really unpleasant and unhappy circumstances that help validate in our own minds that we are worthy of that anger and of having that knife turned against us. Because how else are we going to be able to move forward? How else are we going to be able to be better? How else can we prevent the anger or the disruption or whatever it is from coming back? Right? So this is really where it comes from. And it is deeply embedded in many of us, if we're really honest. So back to the story with my teacher. She was telling us about the knives and the tendency to strike outward with the knife or inward. And she turned to all of us and she said, so which is the right one? Should we strike out or should we strike in? And everyone in the group, started to kind of look around. We didn't know the answer. It didn't seem to fit with this principle of nonviolence that's so prevalent in Buddhism. So we struggled to know quite where to go with it, to go next. And finally she said, the answer isn't to strike outward or to strike inward. It's to put down the knife. It blew my mind. I had never considered that it was possible to put down the knife. Not only that, I remember I sat there and I just thought, how would I even begin to put down the knife? And in retrospect, where it now feels very natural that it's rare that I even pick up the knife. Very rare that I pick up the knife. If I ever, it just isn't, it's not part, it's not part of my repertoire to pick up a knife. I'm very good at bluffing a knife. Let's put it that way. I can be very, very good at bluffing a knife with others if I can see that that's the only skillful action to take. That's a discussion for another video entirely. And it's really only, it's a last resort in a circumstance where anger or the threat of anger is really the only thing that will get through to a particular person or group of people. What I'm talking about is literally disarming and making a choice when you recognize that you're about to turn the anger at someone else or about to turn it inward, and then simply saying, I have to put the knife down. So what do you do? I remember I asked her about it and she said, well, the best thing to do is to practice self-compassion. And it wasn't the first time I'd heard that. It wasn't the first time I'd heard about self-compassion. But I realized at that moment I didn't really know what self-compassion meant. And then I remembered that quote, and the quote was, pulling it back up, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Love the Buddha. And it's not really, again, it's a fake, so-called fake Buddha quote. It's paraphrased from a real, Pali, It's from a real sutra in the Pali Canon. And it's very, very poorly paraphrased, but I actually feel like it's a much better frame of logic than what's actually written in truth. So, and here's the thing. If it has the effect of, working that well, what's the problem? So I offer that to you because if you really take the time and examine it, you'll find that it's really the truth. That you are as worthy as anyone else on the planet of your own love and affection. Think about that for a minute, because the tendency is that we're very happy to offer it to others, but the thought of offering it to ourselves brings up all kinds of unworthiness, self-disgust, disgrace, and more anger, right? So I'd like to offer a practice specifically for the moment of recognizing that you're holding the knife. First, you have to be willing to recognize that there's a knife, right? There's a desire, you're aroused with anger enough that you're ready to strike out at someone else on some level, or you are already inwardly striking out at yourself. And it's a problem. A lot of our time and energy in life can be wasted and just blown away by the amount of energy we expend on being, holding spiraling anger and angry thoughts that are intended to go towards someone else, or spiraling angry thoughts that are about ourselves, right? When I think about the years that I motivated myself into the gym, it's very hard for me to motivate myself into exercise anymore, because I can't do it from a place of self-loathing and desperation to be good or to be better. Because I've already blown those concepts away on some level enough that now I really have to come to it from a place of self-love. Like, wow, I really need to do whatever this is, go to yoga class or take a long walk, because my body will be happier, because I will feel better, because I will be able to be more available to a group of students, because whatever it is, because I don't want to die young if I don't have to. Not out of fear, right, but out of love, because I really love to be alive. So, that said, you have to do something to interrupt the thoughts, right? It's really hideously uncomfortable to be in the body when you're angry. I think we can all agree on that. And that's why our brains will begin producing all of this thinking, right? All of this thinking. And if you can pause long enough to notice that's happening, that the spiraling thoughts are happening in the head, you'll also begin to notice that your breathing is up a lot higher in your body, probably, right? You may notice clenched fists. You may notice a lot of tension in the jaw. You may notice a tense neck. What are some of a very tense belly? A lot of times the belly or the chest will get very tight. The key to stopping the thoughts is to do what your body doesn't want you to do, right? Or what we don't want to do, which is to come back into the body. It's paradoxical, but it works. So the key is to stop what you're doing, whatever it is, interrupt it, go someplace else where you can be quiet and still. If it's in your car, pull off to the side of the road if you can, and just take a few minutes. If you're in an office, go somewhere where you're away from other people, especially if they're the people that may be triggering you, right? Stop what you're doing and interrupt the cycle. Get away from it. And then the next thing you want to do is breathe. And I know that sounds like the absolute worst fucking thing I could possibly have asked you, and yet simple, and probably sounds really cliche. Right? So there is a particular practice and visualization, and it's the only one that ever worked for me, because I'm too smart to deal with cliche shit. it really feels insulting. And I would imagine that if you're watching this, you may feel very similarly. But the whole like take a deep breath and count to 5 thing never ever worked for me. It just made me want to punch somebody. Again, there goes that knife, right? So, and usually made me want to punch the person that told me, honestly. So the key was, I can't remember which book I found it in. I'm in the process of going through every book I have that's written by Thich Nhat Hanh in the hopes that I will find the book that I'm looking for that has this written down, because I've given away enough copies of his books and then replaced them. I'm not really sure which book it's from, but it's huge and I've memorized it and I know it. It may very well be from this one, which is one of the ones, it's hands down my favorite of all of his books. But in this particular book, or it may very well be this one, it may be another one. It could be Pieces Every Step. I'm going to have to go back and look at that one too. In it, he describes a tree. And he talks about how when the wind is blowing in the tree, you can see like you can see the branches and leaves waving all over and looking completely out of control. And it looks kind of dangerous, right? If you were a small animal or bird, you don't try and stay in the tree. You try to get to lower ground where it's safe. And he uses that as an analogy to talk about what the brain is like when we're in the middle of a thought storm, where the thoughts are like a tornado, right? They're like a tornado wind spiraling out of control, right? You don't want to stay up here. It's not safe, right? Yet, it's not comfortable to feel anger physically in the body, which is why we think we get tricked into going up here in the first place. The key is to pause and, to get out of there, you have to recognize that you were there in the first place and come down into the trunk of the tree. And I swear it works. If you are visualizing that tree, it will be very different for you. If you imagine your body is that tree and your head is the branches, come down into the trunk of your tree. Put your hands there. Bring your awareness there. Take a few deep breaths and literally try and see if you can just begin to relax the tension in your belly. And you literally want to practice breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And there's a poem that he writes that he puts with it, and I have it written down. I don't need it, but I'll show you this little illustration I made. But it's literally, you think in on the inhale, out on the exhale. And after you've thought in, out a few times, you then add slow, deep. So slow on the inhale, deep on the exhale. Then if you feel safe and comfortable, you add calm, ease. So it's giving your brain something to concentrate on and think on besides the body, right? It's really hard in that moment to come back to thinking in, out, slow, deep, calm, ease, smile, release. Really hard. But it's incredibly effective, right? It's incredibly effective. I keep coming back to this little paper. I drew this little crummy picture like a couple of years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, for a group of students because I was hoping to help them manage nerves, panic attacks, anger, spiraling thoughts, etc. Actors really, really suffer from that a lot, especially student actors. I think it's also just inherent in being a college student, honestly. So I drew it like this because I wanted to give them something tangible at the end of a class, hold in hand. I scratched it out in about 5-10 minutes and then photocopied it. And they loved it so much that I ended up I've just continued to use it and made loads and loads of photocopies of it. And I still have them all around my house in various folders. And I found it. I love that. It's so simple. It's not even good art, which I really don't mind. But when it's not safe, you're practicing bringing yourself, from up here in the tree branches down into the body, right? So the Be Here Now is really not Thich Nhat Hanh's. That one is Ram Dass's, but I borrowed it because it was effective. It was effective for this particular one. So it's something that this is a practice. It literally changed my whole life. It is a beautiful mindfulness-based practice. I really don't know how frequently or often it's taught. I've only ever encountered it with Thich Nhat Hanh. In all of the different Buddhist sanghas and places that I've retreated or practiced, I've never encountered it again. But I've also never trained or worked with any of Thich Nhat Hanh's official sangha. So I don't know, it's probably out there somewhere. But I offer that to you freely, that is the practice. Recognize that you're angry and about to strike out towards someone else or towards yourself. The next thing you want to do is visualize your body as a tree. Find a safe place to take your tree, right, out of danger. So get away from whatever the source of the anger is and go somewhere else that's quiet. Once you're there, recognize that you need to go from being in the branches of the tree down into the trunk of the tree. And as you do that, you want to bring your whole focus into your belly and into your breath. Anchor that process by just simply thinking in, out, slow, deep, calm, ease, smile, release. Over and over and over again. And I remember when I would do this, I would sometimes feel like I would cry my way through it, right? So that happens. It's normal. It's normal. Whatever comes up it's probably completely normal. If you can stick it out and stay with it long enough to return your body and your whole body mind back to a place of stillness, you will not regret it. You will not regret it. Being with anger and the ability to stay with anger when it's really cooking and it's really boiling transforms it. Don't be afraid of your anger. If you've come back to a place where you can stop the thoughts, eventually the practice of doing that over and over and over and over again will begin to free and release the energy of the anger. And when it does that, because your body is calm and your mind is calm, and that emotion isn't trapped in some part of your physiology, right? It's not in your jaw. It's not in your fists, right? It's not in a tight mouth and face. It's not in a tight belly. It's not trapped in spiraling thoughts. When that system calms down and the energy of that emotion is free, what it tends to do is you will feel tremendously energized. And it gives you the insight, that space for that emotion to be there, gives you the insight to know what you need to do next, which is often where the spiraling thoughts come from. We just jump right from, the boiling pot into the fire, thinking that will solve the problem and give us the answer. But it doesn't. You have to calm your body, you have to calm your mind before you can come to a place where you've got enough stillness for there to be true insight. But the anger itself is what holds that insight. You won't find it from somewhere else. You will not find the satisfaction that you want through striking out. It won't happen. But if what you're wanting is to solve the problem, the anger will give you the answer you're looking for. Okay, enough of that. It's a long enough video. With that, I wish you tremendous, tremendous peace. And again, I won't say that I have all the answers, but I will say that this is a practice, and these practices and videos that I'm offering are things that have completely transformed me and changed my life entirely in ways that I can't even begin to tell you. So I wish you a beautiful week, and until next time.